Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this wonderful Wednesday afternoon. And surprisingly, we got more basketball to talk about. I mean, I'm just as surprised as everyone else. So, the Timberwolves, they've managed to stay alive in this series and avoid the sweep. So, that's going to be the first segment that we're going to talk about. Excuse me. Then, in the second segment, we are going to actually talk about two things. Bronny keeping his name in the NBA draft, as well as Tyronn Lue expecting to sign a huge new contract with the Clippers. This news just happened recently, but I already had this Bronny segment lined up, so I might as well talk about both of them. Now, in the third segment, we are going to be looking at Tyrese Halliburton and his injury status and whether or not he's going to be able to play for Team USA this coming summer for the Olympics, and the possibilities on some of the other players that Team USA could look to get if Halliburton is not able to play. Then in the fourth segment, we are going to be looking at the possibility of Jimmy Butler returning to Philly, because Philly is looking to pursue Jimmy Butler and give him a max deal if he does go. So we also have a special fifth segment that is going to be one of the more fun segments towards the end. I reveal that at the end of the fourth segment, so be sure to stay tuned up until then to see what it is. And then, before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody to please use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. That is GSMCPodcast.net. It really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCPodcast.net. And with that out of the way, we can go right ahead and talk about this. Let me just adjust my computer real quick. We can go right ahead and talk about the series between the Dallas Mavericks and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, I'm a little bit surprised at how the Timberwolves were able to win a game in this series, but I mean, I'm not really that upset about it, and I'm not upset that my pick was wrong, because if you guys watched the previous podcast, I said, oh, this is probably going to be a sweep, but I'm glad that it's not, because that just means more basketball for me and more basketball for the fans and more basketball to talk about on this podcast. So let me just go right ahead and open up the graphic of the score. So as you can see, the Mavericks, they ended up losing 100-105. And I mean, what was the big difference in this game, and how did the Timberwolves win it? Well, obviously, it was the performance from the other two stars that the Timberwolves had. Now, throughout a majority of the series, these two guys have been, Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns, they've been very quiet offensively. But now in this game, they finally stepped up when they desperately needed it, even with Karl-Anthony Towns fouling out towards the end of the game. They got into foul trouble rather really early, but still it was just enough for them to be able to come back and, well, not really come back, but make this series a little bit more competitive and win the game in the end. Anthony Edwards, these were his stats for the game: 29 points, 10 rebounds, and 9 assists. Just one assist off of a triple-double, which is very, very impressive. About time he finally had a good game. He's been avoiding a lot of criticism from the media recently, and I'm honestly a little bit surprised by this, because if this was Jason Tatum or if this was Jaylen Brown who was playing this bad throughout the majority of the series, no one would hesitate but flame them. Anthony Edwards gets bubble wrapped, but those two guys get crucified. And imagine if it was LeBron. Oh my gosh, imagine if it was LeBron playing this bad against the Dallas Mavericks. That's never happened before. Literally, to this day, he still gets criticized for how badly he played in the Mavericks series. But Anthony Edwards, nah, he doesn't get one lick of criticism, which is a little bit. I'm rather annoyed, simply because, again, if this were to happen to LeBron, or if this were to happen to literally any other star in the league right now, they wouldn't be okay. For some reason, the screen is not. That's great. For some reason, it's not putting up the stats, and I have no idea why. It doesn't make any sense to me. Why is it doing this now? But yeah, this is there we go. Now it wants to do it. I don't know what's wrong. So yeah, 29 points, 10 rebounds, and 9 assists. Again, I apologize for that. I have no idea why. It's just it doesn't switch when I want it to. It's not really working as well. But here, Karl Anthony Towns' stats. Hopefully they switch. Yeah, they finally do switch. Jesus, like only took them a while. So 25 points, 5 rebounds, and 1 assist. He did get into foul trouble in this game, and the foul trouble. He probably could have dropped a few more points if he didn't get into foul trouble for this game. And he shot very efficiently from the field, 9 for 13 and 4 of 5 from 3. Now, this is what happens when your star players and your key players contribute to the team. This is exactly what happens, because if you notice in the previous matchups that they've played, they've lost all of the games, and the games have been really, really close. Like, for example, in Game 1, they lost 108 to 105. That was a 3-point difference. In Game 2, they lost 109 to 108. That was a 1-point difference. And in Game 3, that was the game where they blew it. Like, they just didn't score throughout the 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter. They did not score whatsoever, and that was when they sort of blew it and caused them to lose 116 to 107. But these performances coming in from Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards, these two performances, they desperately needed them. And this was the biggest difference maker, because once these two were scoring efficiently and once these two were producing enough, the teams ended up winning, because they were awful in the first 3 games. Like, it was just, but their defense, like the team's defense, was holding up very, very well. Like I said before, Rudy Gobert, he has the series so far. He's got a positive box plus minus compared to Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns, who have a negative box plus minus, meaning that Anthony Edwards, every time that he's on the court, the team gets outscored, and every time Karl Anthony Towns is on the court, the team gets outscored. And it doesn't help the team whatsoever, because, like, yes, you could have a very solid defense, but if you cannot put the ball in the hoop, you're not going to win the game. And this happens every single time to anyone that gets Michael Jordan comparisons. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Those shoes, they're incredibly tough to fill, and I understand that it's not everyone can have bad games. Like, it's going to happen, but it's a certain degree of how many bad games you should be allowed to have, at least in my opinion, before the criticism starts rolling in. Like, you're allowed to have bad games. I'm not saying that you're not allowed to have them, but if you are the star player on the team and you have multiple consistent bad games, that is a problem. Like, and that should be addressed. And I guarantee you, if LeBron had 3 bad games in a row in the playoffs, the entire media would crucify him for the first bad game that he had. Like, and if it resulted in a loss, even worse. Now, add another game on top of that, then that's more crucifixion. Then a third game, that is more crucifixion as well. Like, there are certain stars and certain players in the NBA that get all sorts of praise, but they avoid every kind of criticism. And then there are players who get zero praise, but get every kind of criticism. And this Anthony Edwards is one of those players. And I might come off as an Anthony Edwards hater. I do not dislike Anthony Edwards or how he plays the game. I just dislike how the media is treating him and bubble wrapping him into trying to make him into the next Michael Jordan. Because what makes this even more ironic to me is how at the end of the game, when Anthony Edwards was talking to the person interviewing him, he said, I just didn't want to get swept. I took it personally. And immediately once he said he takes it personally, that's when the MJ comparisons started to flow yet again. And I just don't agree with it. I do not like it. I don't like when players get compared to MJ when they haven't really done much in the league, especially when they're down 3-0 in the series. Like, that just doesn't happen. And there goes my phone ringing yet again. So with that out of the way, we are out of time for this first segment. So now I will go ahead and go into the second segment where I talk about Bronny James and him keeping his name in the draft. So I will be right back after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. Some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment, of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to be talking about two things. First, we're going to be talking about Bronny keeping his name in the NBA draft, as well as talking about Tyronn Lue and his new contract. Before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody to please go ahead and use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. That is GSMCPodcast.net. It really helps the show, makes the show much more interacting between myself and you guys. And with that out of the way, we can go right ahead and talk about the two topics. So we might as well go ahead. Let's get Tyronn Lue's situation out of the way first, because I know, like, that's sort of a, like, you know, it's pretty straightforward exactly, like, what's going to happen. So I can just get that out of the way immediately, because so Tyronn Lue, he's the coach of the Clippers, and he's been the coach of the Clippers for a while. He was the only coach of the Clippers that has ever been able to make it to the Western Conference Finals. And I mean, to be fair, he actually made that series a little bit competitive despite not having Kawhi Leonard. Once he did that in many years ago, it feels like it. But the Clippers, they haven't really had much success recently, ever since they made it to the finals that year the Western Conference Finals in 2021. Now, the reason being is because of injuries. Now, those injuries, like, it would be really unfair if you were to judge a coach and his ability if the team is unhealthy. Like, I mean, you're not going to fire Tyronn Lue for not being able to make it back to the Western Conference Finals, because Kawhi Leonard or Paul George, sometimes they aren't healthy for those games. And you're not going to really get that upset over it. But they're expected to sign, the Clippers are expected to give him a contract that makes him one of the most paid coaches in the NBA right now. So I just wanted to bring attention to that because that is like it was the most recent ESPN notification that I just got, and so again, it's very well deserved in my personal opinion because the fact that he's going again, one of the most paid coaches in the NBA, being named one of the most paid coaches in the NBA is an honor that not many people can like are able to have. And because of that, I really feel like, it should have definitely been mentioned. He went from being one of LeBron's scapegoats to being one of the most paid coaches in the NBA. Now that is determination because there is the stipulation that a lot of LeBron's coaches aren't really that successful without LeBron. And it makes total sense. Like, they eventually get fired. Tyronn Lue did get fired from the Cavs, but like from the Cavs organization. But it would seem like it was more so the Cavs were a really bad team than Tyronn Lue was a really bad coach. Like, now it seems like it. So he's definitely getting a lot more respect as a coach, and I feel happy for him. Like, thank the Lord that he's actually doing good without LeBron. He was getting made fun of a lot for not being a good coach, and he got what he deserved. So now we will go ahead and go into the actual second segment, which is going to be about Bronny James and him keeping his name in the NBA draft. So I didn't even know you could do this. Like, I had no idea that you can do half of the things that what Bronny is doing. I mean, choosing between like both. There was in the beginning where he said if he doesn't go in the draft, then he's going to go back into the transfer portal for college. And now it's saying that he's going to keep his name in the NBA draft. And I'm not sure exactly if that means that he's not going to be able to enroll in college if he doesn't make it to if he doesn't get picked in the draft. But, these are a lot of things that we have not seen a college player do. Now, here's a quote from Paul saying I believe Rich Paul, he's saying he's a really good prospect who has a lot of room for growth. It only takes one team. I don't care where that team is. Now, Paul added that he and James have no interest in signing a two-way contract. I had no idea that you can do that either. Like, I had no idea that a college player could refuse a two-way contract from an NBA team. Like, I didn't even know that was possible. And Bronny James has been invited to several workouts by more than 10 NBA franchises. But one thing that he's going to do is limit those visits to just a few teams. Again, I didn't even know you could do that. I had no idea that you can deny like certain visits from other teams. I had no idea you could do that. And I also didn't expect Bronny to do that. Like, I thought he was going to like weigh a lot of his options and like, check to see, oh, maybe I can join this team, maybe I can join that team, like a usual college prospect. But now he's limiting them to just the Suns and the Lakers for workouts, which again, I didn't even know you could do that. Like, this is just blowing my mind. This man he's already getting the LeBron treatment. Like, when you're LeBron's son, I guess anything is possible. Like, the Suns, they hold the number 22 pick in the upcoming draft, while the Lakers, they hold the 55th pick in the NBA draft. So, Bronny, he suffered cardiac arrest 9 months ago, and he had to undergo a procedure to repair a heart defect. He was cleared to play by the NBA's fitness and play panel earlier in May, sources told Woj and Giovanni. So that's just a little bit of intel that you guys might need to know. He is a full participant in the NBA's draft combine and was tested extremely well in the athletic measurements and the shooting drills. He was a phenomenal shooter in those drills. You can watch the clips on Twitter. He was shooting the lights out of that arena. Now, he played 25 games during his lone season at USC. However, he averaged only 4 points, 2 assists, and was shooting 36% from the field and 26% from 3. Now, the draft is a 2-day event. this year, with the opening round being held on June 26th. Round 2 will take place the following day. So those are just like information that you guys might need if you guys are eyeing on Bronny and his potential in the NBA. Now, what I think about this move, I personally, again, I'm always like on the side of make sure you get your education first and then go ahead and play in the professional leagues, simply because if you get injured, then what's your next step? Like, what would be your plan B if you get injured? And if you just go all in, like, oh, I'm going to be an NBA star, I'm going to go to declare for the draft, like, there's a possibility, like, I don't want to be a naysayer, and I don't want to be someone that's negative, but there is a possibility that either you don't get picked, you don't pan out the way that you think you're going to pan out, or you get hurt. And those three possibilities, they're all likely, they could happen. They could happen to absolutely anyone, which is why it's important for you to have a backup plan for when that does happen, if that does happen. Because now, I'm saying this from the perspective because, like, I have uncles and I have family members. Since we're Dominican, they play a lot of baseball, and they've literally grown up playing baseball. Like, on that island, that's like, it's a sport that like everyone plays, and everyone in my family played that sport as well. So the fact that, and we have at least my family, they have several cousins, several uncles that have participated in professional baseball, but unfortunately for them, their time playing baseball was cut short due to injury. And because of that, they did not have any sort of backup plan, because in their mind they thought, oh, like, this is what I was supposed to be. This is what I was put on this earth to do. This is why I was born. This is my purpose, right? And that thought sort of clouded their mindset and prevented them from exploring other possibilities and other opportunities that they can have. And because of that, once they got injured, they had no idea what was next for them. And that sort of mentality was sort of taught to my family and the rest of my cousins that play a sport like that. It's like, you always have to have a backup plan, otherwise you might not, like, just in case it doesn't pan out. Like, you always need to have something to do. And the fact that Bronny is taking this, like, approach, like, immediately, it doesn't really sit right with me, in my opinion. Like, I personally don't agree with this move, but, to each their own. He can decide what he wants to do, but hopefully he does get picked, and that's sort of, like, that's basically it for the second segment, because, again, it's all just down to chance right now, and it's just the boldness coming from Bronny at the fact that he decides to keep his name in the draft, and commit to it. Like, it's incredibly bold for someone of his position and someone of his stature. But now that with that, we are out of time for this next segment. So now I will go ahead and go into the third segment, where I talk about Tyrese Halliburton and, Team USA, whether or not he's going to play for Team USA, the possibilities, who could get picked up to replace him, all of that sort of stuff. I will be right back after this short break, so stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this next segment, we are going to be talking about Tyrese Halliburton and Team USA. So, why bring this up? Like, that's going to be the main question. Why bother to bring this up? And, oh, okay. Interesting. I just got an ESPN notification for regarding golf. If you guys want to go ahead, there is a golf podcast that we have, so I do recommend watching that as well. But basically, so for Team USA, Tyrese Halliburton, he was one of the guards that was okay, hold on, just give me 1 second while I turn that off because that's going to be annoying. I'll be right back. And we're back. I apologize for that. The air conditioner just randomly decided to turn on. I guess that was my I don't know who did that, but apart from that, so Team USA. Let's go talk about Team USA. So, the teams, they've already been selected, and Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Bam Adebayo, Devin Booker, Steph Curry, Anthony Davis, Anthony Edwards, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Halliburton, Drew Holiday, Kawhi, and Jason Tatum, they've all been chosen to be part of the Team USA roster. Right? Nothing wrong about that. I mean, granted, I do think there's a lot of wrong with the roster simply because there were certain players that got picked over other players, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Tyrese Halliburton specifically. So, Halliburton, he went out of the playoffs due to injury when he was going up against the Celtics. Now, that injury, not entirely sure when is going to be the time that he'll return from it. Like, I'm not entirely sure when he's going to return from injury. It's a little bit of a mystery. And with that in mind, the Olympics are coming up really, really soon. So now there's a whole possibility that Halliburton might not recover in time to be able to play for Team USA. And that's a little bit concerning, just a little bit, if we didn't have such talented basketball players in the NBA. And I personally was not a fan of Tyrese Halliburton's acquisition whatsoever on Team USA. I think there were several better options that could have been chosen for Team USA, and now I'm actually going to get into those options because there is a possibility that he might not be available to play for Team USA. So option one, obviously, the King of New York, Jalen Brunson. He, without a doubt, he deserves to be on this roster. I do not care what anyone says. That performance in the playoffs was legendary. That performance in the playoffs was beautiful. It was flawless. And the only reason why that he lost was because of the injuries. But he would be a perfect addition to Team USA. The biggest problem, however, he has a broken hand. And that also might not recover very, very well in the, for Team USA. But I wanted to bring this up because why wasn't he picked before Halliburton? I genuinely, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Who do you think is better? Because I do not agree with this. I do not agree with the fact that Jalen Brunson was not picked for Team USA. I do not like it. Doesn't make any sense. He was he's a much better player than Halliburton. It doesn't matter. Halliburton, he might be a better passer, sure, but you already have playmaking on the team, and you already have no, I did not like the acquisition of Halliburton whatsoever. Now, you can call it me just being a hater, you can call it whatever you want, but I really think that Jalen Brunson would have been a much better option. Granted, they're both injured, so I guess you guys can be like, well, they're both injured, so I mean, what's the point in bringing this up? So that's why I have several other options for this, for Team USA. An obvious option that I thought was obvious for everyone is Kyrie Irving. I mean, I'm surprised that he didn't even make the roster on this on the first go around. Kyrie, he already has history with Team USA. He's already won a gold medal with Team USA on the Olympics, and I'm honestly just very surprised that he wasn't in in any of these selections for the guards, because look at the point guards that are picked. Look at the guards that are picked over him: Drew Holiday, and Halliburton, and Devin Booker. Devin Booker, maybe I can understand why they would want Devin Booker on the team, but picking Halliburton over Kyrie, are we serious right now? It might be. There's a little bit of a speculation that it might be because of Kyrie Irving's relationship with Kevin Durant and LeBron James, and that made people hesitant on bringing him onto, or that might have made people hesitant on bringing him onto Team USA. But at the end of the day, it's I feel like this is way different than just NBA basketball. This is about your nation. This is about your home, and it doesn't matter what fan or what team you're affiliated with, or what NBA team you like. Once you wear that Team USA roster, once you wear that Team USA jersey, and you're on that roster, everyone is your fan. Everyone in the United States is your fan. I mean, Kobe said this once in when he was in the Netflix documentary series, The Redeem Team. So there was a Boston Celtics fan that recently just beat the Celtics recently beat the Lakers in the NBA Finals. And Kobe thought that the Celtics fan was going to talk his talk about the NBA Finals, but instead he says, "Go win the gold for us." So it's bigger than NBA basketball. These types of things are bigger than the NBA, and it should be treated that way. Kyrie should be able to play with Kevin Durant and LeBron, and there should be no there should be no fear of oh, maybe the chemistry isn't going to mesh that well. I mean, I understand why they didn't back in 1992, I understand why they might not have wanted Isaiah Thomas on the roster, because Isaiah Thomas and the Bad Boy Pistons, they were some of the dirtiest players in NBA history, and that makes total sense why they wouldn't want Isaiah Thomas on the roster, because they would fight. They would try to fight, I guess you could say, and they would hard foul every single one of them and try to injure every single one of them. At least that's what the hard fouls seem like they were doing. And that is completely different than the drama that Kyrie had to start and the drama around the team. Completely different. And they're grown men. They can brush that aside and be like, all right, it's time to win the gold. Like I feel like these athletes, like, they could do that. I don't. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Like, do you guys really believe that Kyrie and Kevin Durant can't put their differences aside and be like, let's win the gold? Like, you really think they can't do that? I think it's blasphemous if you think they can't. But even if you think that that chemistry is going to be a little bit off, there's also Trae Young. Like, Trae Young is a phenomenal point guard. And, I mean, he's, without a doubt, he's better than Tyrese Halliburton. I'm sorry to say this. Trae Young is more consistent than Halliburton. He's been more consistent in the NBA throughout many seasons. He's a better scoring option. He can pass the ball just as well as Halliburton. The only thing that's really lacking is his size and the defense. But aside from that, that's not the reason why you put Trae Young on the floor, and that's not the reason why you put Halliburton on the floor either. You put them on the floor to score the basketball, shoot the basketball, pass the ball, and play make. Like, that's why you have those 2 point guards on your team in the first place. And I feel like Trae Young, he just does it at a much better and more consistent rate than Halliburton, while at the same time being a better scoring option than Halliburton. I mean, Trae Young has, every single season that Trae Young has played in the NBA, he's been top 5 in assists, in total assists and in assists average, while at the same time still averaging around like 26 points per game or 28 points per game in the season. That is phenomenal, that is consistent, and it should be recognized. And the fact that Halliburton got a spot over him is insane to me. So, if there was anyone that definitely deserves to be on the Team USA roster, if Halliburton isn't available, it should be Trae Young. Like, if you're worried about the chemistry with Kyrie and Kevin Durant along with LeBron, go with Trae Young. That would be a safer option. So that's all I have for this third segment. So with that, we are out of time, and so we will go ahead and go into the fourth segment, where I will be talking about the possibility of Jimmy Butler returning to Philly. Well, at least he's not planning on returning to Philly, but I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the details on exactly what's going on with that situation. So I will be right back after this short break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we're going to talk about Jimmy Butler and his potential return to the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, this isn't really going to be his decision on, returning. He didn't specifically say, oh, I want to go back to Philly. This is Philly wanting him to come back. So It's kind of ironic, and it's kind of funny how they had Jimmy Butler on the roster before in 2019, but they traded for him, but they decided to let him go, and join the Miami Heat, and instead they would acquire Tobias Harris. And there was a running joke about how Jimmy Butler got replaced by Tobias Harris, and Jimmy took it personally, and Jimmy Butler being Jimmy Butler and the loudmouth that he is, he took to talking on the internet at one point, and he was like, they took Tobias Harris over me, because Tobias Harris, he was playing very well when he was on the Clippers, and then they decided to pursue him, but ever since then, he hasn't really been that same monster that he was on the Clippers, and it was really the fact that they replaced Jimmy Butler with Tobias Harris. It's kind of insulting, given what Jimmy Butler has been able to do with the Miami Heat and with the team as a whole. So I'm looking at this article by Caden Hardy. So the Sixers had some success this past season after making it into the 2024 NBA playoffs. While they finished 7th in the Eastern Conference, the team was bounced in the first round by the Knicks. We love to hear that. The Miami Heat had a similar season to the Sixers. They placed 8th in the conference. However, they got eliminated in the first round by the Boston Celtics, who are currently playing in the NBA Finals. While it may seem that these two teams would want to move in opposite directions, the Sixers are prepared to make an offer for the Heat star Jimmy Butler and offer him a max extension upon his return to the city that he once called home. So, if you remember in 2019, the Sixers they lost to the eventual 2019, They lost to the eventual NBA champions, the Toronto Raptors, and the way that they lost was incredibly heartbreaking for a lot of Philadelphia fans because the ball bounced around the rim 4 times before eventually going in, and that essentially sealed the series in Game 7. They were really close. Like, they took the championship Raptors to 7 games and lost on one of the most clutch shots in NBA history. And after that, they just decided to let go of Jimmy Butler and, pursue and try to, build the duo between Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, and add Tobias Harris. Now, this was proven to be one of the biggest mistakes in the history of the NBA because Ben Simmons, not that guy. I am not going to talk about him because I cannot stand his name. I cannot stand the fact that he has a job in the NBA. No. I will be the first one to say no. But aside from that, Jimmy, he's had a lot more success on the Miami Heat than he did with the Sixers. There's no telling, whether or not the Sixers would have gone farther with Jimmy Butler than without him. But at the same time, they definitely had a much better shot. I feel like that Sixers team with Jimmy Butler was very, very underrated. Now, according to Keith Pompey of the Sixers Inquiry, they have a list of goals to complete in free agency. The first involves signing superstar Paul George into free agency, and if these plans fall through, could we see Butler suiting for the Sixers next season? That is the ultimate question, because granted, Paul George is going to ask for a lot of money, and I'm sure that Jimmy Butler is also going to ask for a lot of money if he decides to go to a completely different team. So, allergies, they're just killing me right now. I apologize. But according to the Miami Heat president, Pat Riley, obviously, what Pat Riley says goes. And it's really, it's really down to just what he says. Because, his word is, almighty for the Miami Heat. And the Heat, they're not interested in trading the NBA star earlier this month, according to Pat Riley. But it seems that he slightly opened up to the idea a little bit, saying there are a possibility of a lot of things are on the table. It's not about getting another star. You get another star and your bench gets weaker. So, it should be noted that Butler had a brief stint, as I mentioned earlier. He briefly played with the Sixers, during which he appeared for just, 55 games after being acquired in a trade with the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I said 2019, I meant 2018. I apologize for that. I messed up the years. I completely forgot about 2019, and I completely forgot about 2018. And while it is possible that the move doesn't happen, the Heat have had reason to get rid of their top players. There have been many rumors about this offseason about a possible retooling in Miami. But as for now, we'll have to wait and see. Actually, wait, no. I'm messing up with the years. I apologize for that, guys. He did play in 2019, and it's I don't know why this article is saying 2017 and 2018. That doesn't sound right whatsoever. In 2019, that was when the Raptors made it all the way, and in 2018, the Golden State Warriors were the ones that won the championship, and they were the ones that swept the Cavs in 2018. So I don't know what this article is talking about. I think they messed up the years because, yeah, I think this article messed up the years. That's actually very hilarious. How do you mess that up? I mean, granted, I messed that up a little bit, but I remember vividly that it was 2018. That was when, the Golden State Warriors, they still had that ridiculous squad, and with Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and they swept LeBron in 2018. I remember it vividly. And then the year after 2018, 2019, that was when the Raptors ended up winning their championship. I don't know why this article is trying to tell me different, and I have honestly, who was the guy who wrote this? Okay. Caden Hardy, don't ever listen to what he has to say, because that almost duped me, and that could definitely dupe a lot of people, because I had to think about it. Was it 2017 or 2018? That does not make any sense, and I remember it vividly because I was alive. This is one of those things where I 100% can remember vividly because I was alive during this time, and I was active. I was incredibly active with basketball at this time. So, and I still am active to this day. But yeah, that was a bad mistake from them. But do I see Jimmy returning to Philly? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. He has the success with the Miami Heat. He's had several successes. He's made it to the Eastern Conference Finals numerous of times, and he's made it to the finals a lot of times with the Miami Heat. So I don't really see him leaving just to go and play with Joel Embiid again. But then again, anything can happen. I just don't, especially one of the things that I really think is just gonna it's not going, and the biggest reason why I think he's not going to sign with the Sixers is because they had an opportunity to have him before, but they declined. And now it seems this is sort of as Charles Barkley would say, and some of the old heads would say, this is sort of that ex-girlfriend that realizes her bad mistake and wants to take you back. And I don't think Jimmy is going to fall for that. That's sort of the analogy that I'm thinking about, because again, the Sixers, they had him and they just chose not to keep him. But then once they see the success that he's having without them, now they want him. And I don't see Jimmy Butler, stooping that low and rejoining his former team. I don't see that happening. But that's basically all I have for this fourth segment. So now we will go ahead and go into the fifth segment, which is going to be a really fun segment. We're going to compare the careers between Allen Iverson and Chris Paul, because there was debate. Jeff Teague said that he believes that Chris Paul has a better career than Iverson. So I'm going to go ahead and look a little bit deeper into that right after this short break. So stay tuned. And we are back with the fifth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fifth segment, we are going to be comparing the two careers between Iverson and Chris Paul. Which one of them had a better career, things of that nature, because that was something that Jeff Teague talked about on his podcast. He said that Chris Paul had a better career than Allen Iverson, I believe. And I'm just going to... So Tyronn Lue... I talked about this in the second segment, but I didn't tell you exactly how much money he'd be making. So the contract is a 5-year, $70 million contract. That is a lot of money to be paying for a coach. Like, I'm very surprised with how much money that he's going to be making in this next season. So let me just go ahead and get these slides up real quick as we compare the careers between Iverson and Chris Paul, because again, this is something that Jeff Teague said. He does believe that Chris Paul has had a better career than Iverson. So first, let's go ahead and look at the answer's career and, what he has going for him, and in terms of the stats and, his accolades, things of that nature. So let's go ahead and... So one of the biggest things that Iverson has over Chris Paul is the fact that he has an MVP to his name, where Chris Paul does not have an MVP to his name whatsoever. So I'm just going to go off of the accolades between just comparing the two of them. So Iverson he played 14 NBA seasons compared to Chris Paul's 19. Now, they both don't have a single NBA championship, which makes this a little bit more difficult, because most of the time a lot of people like to look at the ring debate. But Chris Paul, he's played in 15 playoff series compared to in 15 playoffs compared to Iverson, who's played in only 8 playoffs. Chris Paul has made 12 All-Star games, while Iverson has only made 11. Again, Iverson, he had 1 MVP. Chris Paul has 0. Chris Paul has made the All-NBA first team 4 times compared to Iverson making it 3 times. And in total selections, Chris Paul has made the All-NBA selection 11 times compared to Iverson's 7. Chris Paul has made the All-Defensive First Team 7 times compared to Iverson, who's made it 0. And Chris Paul has made the All-Defensive Team 9 total times compared to Iverson's 0. Iverson has been a scoring leader for 4 seasons compared to Chris Paul, who's been a scoring leader for 0. Chris Paul has been an assist leader for 5 seasons, while Iverson has been an assist leader for 0. Chris Paul has been a steals leader for 6 seasons, compared to Iverson, who's been a steals leader for 3 seasons. They both have Rookie of the Year to their resume, but again, a lot of the things that are being said, they're really marginal. It's really, really close comparing the career of Chris Paul and the career of Iverson. Now, Iverson, he averages way more points per game than Chris Paul, 26 compared to Chris Paul's 17. The rebounds per game, Chris Paul has a slight edge of 4.5 compared to Iverson's 3.7. And the assists, which are honestly the biggest difference when looking at the guards, Chris Paul has almost 10, which is, 9.4. Again, almost 10. And Iverson has had 6.2. That's how much he averages. And they both average roughly the same amount of steals for their career, 2.1 from Chris Paul and 2.2 from Allen Iverson. Again, basically the exact same. The blocks per game, it's also the exact same at 0.2. And next we move on to the counting stats. So more than likely, obviously Chris Paul is going to have a lot more counting stats than Allen Iverson due to the longevity and how long that he's been playing. So the one thing that Iverson has over Chris Paul in terms of counting stats is points. He has 24,000 points compared to Chris Paul's 22,000. This is roughly, by the way, the exact amount of Allen Iverson's points is 24,368, with Chris Paul 22,288. Now, the total rebounds, Iverson has 3,000, Chris Paul has 5,000. Chris Paul has almost double the amount of assists, total assists, that Iverson has. That is 11,000, almost 12,000, compared to Iverson's 5,000, almost 6,000. And the total steals, again, Chris Paul almost has double the total steals of Iverson, where he has 2,000, where Iverson almost has 2,000. But Chris Paul's 2,000 is almost like, it's almost 3,000. Actually, no, so it's not double. Like, excuse me, that's terrible math. That is horrible math. But he has more steals, more total steals. Now, if we're looking at percentages, I skipped over the blocks because they're point guards, and it's like, the point guards, they're not going to get that many blocks. But if we're looking at field goal percentage, Chris Paul averages 47% from the field compared to Iverson's 42% from the field, which makes a lot of sense. Iverson was known for being a shot chucker and a really difficult shot maker. He takes a lot of difficult shots and a lot of bad shots, and it makes sense why. I mean, Chris Paul, he takes a lot more efficient shots than Allen Iverson. They both take the mid-ranges, but Chris Paul's mid-range game is crazy automatic when you're in that pick and roll. Now, the three-point shooting percentage, Iverson shoots 31% compared to Chris Paul, who shoots 36%. And at the free throw percentage, Iverson shoots 78%, while Chris Paul shoots 87%. So, that is, like, really, really, really close. Again, like, a lot of these players and their a lot of these accolades, like, they're very, very close. And like, again, all the stats that they've recorded, they're marginal in a sense, aside from assists. That is like the biggest difference. Now, let's look at their best seasons. So Iverson's best season in terms of points per game was in 2006, where he averaged 33. And Chris Paul's best scoring season was in 2009, when he averaged 22 points per game. But Chris Paul wasn't really known as being a scorer. He was known as a playmaker that had the ability to score. And the rebounds per game, his best, again, comes with, in 2009, 5.5 rebounds per game coming in from Chris Paul, compared to Iverson, 1999, 4.9 rebounds per game. Nothing really that important because they are guards, not expected to get that many rebounds. Chris Paul's best assist season was in 2008, averaging 11.6, while Iverson's was in 2005, averaging 7.9. The steals per game, their best season averaging steals was the exact same, 2.8 steals they averaged. Chris Paul did it in 2009, Iverson did it in 2002, and we can just skip over the blocks because, like, again, like, there's no real need to do that. Now, in the playoffs, which is the biggest difference here, Iverson averaged 29 points per game in his best play in the playoffs. Now, Chris Paul averaged 20 points per game in the playoffs. Chris Paul averaged more assists than Iverson did in the playoffs, 8.3 compared to Iverson's 6, but Iverson averaged a lot more, slightly more steals, 2.1 steals compared to Chris Paul's 1.9 steals, which is basically 2. Like, they're basically the exact same. Now, the playoff total stats, obviously, with Chris Paul's longevity, he has more counting stats than Iverson in every single category. In points, rebounds, assists, and especially in assists. Like, good, I'm looking at the numbers and the assists, and good God, like, 425 assists from Iverson compared to 1,233 total assists from Chris Paul. That is crazy. That is a crazy margin. And the steals, again, another crazy margin, almost 140 steals being the difference between Chris Paul and Iverson. And the shooting percentages, again, Chris Paul has the slight advantage. 48% from the field with compared to 40%, 37% from 3 compared to 32%, and 85% from the free throw line compared to 76%. Chris Paul, Iverson, just in case you're questioning the order. And the best playoffs, like the best playoff series that they've had, Iverson beats Chris Paul in points per game, 32 points per game compared to 25 points per game. Chris Paul beats him in rebounds, 7 rebounds per game in 2020 compared to Iverson's 4 in 2001. Chris Paul averaged more assists than Iverson in his best playoff series. Now, Iverson, he averaged 10 assists in 2005 compared to Chris Paul's 11.5, averaged in 2011. The steals, again, they're roughly the same. Chris Paul averaged 2.8 in 2014. Iverson averaged 2.6 in 2002. And the blocks, it doesn't really matter because they're both guards. Now, when you look at, when you look at their individual, when you look at their counting stats, obviously it would seem that, Chris Paul, he has the edge. But when you look at the averages, sometimes, not all the time, it would seem that Iverson would have the edge. Now, one thing that makes this, one thing that's incredibly jarring is the fact that, Iverson is more cemented into the history of basketball for the right reason, right? Iverson, he has an MVP, and he's he's been a very key factor and in the development of basketball. I'm trying to switch the slide right now, but Iverson, he has that MVP, and that cemented him in NBA history for the right reason, because he was the best player in the NBA that season, according to the MVP. Even though, in my opinion, the MVP that year in 2001 was Shaq, but that's a completely different conversation. So he's cemented for the right reason. Chris Paul, on the other hand, and also another thing that Iverson does aside from Chris Paul is also the culture. I mean, this was arguably the first time that we've seen a player not act that professionally, and on top of that, he also has, the infamous meme. We talking about practice, not a game. We talking about practice. Again, cemented into the NBA for all the right reasons, and Chris Paul, on the other hand, has not been cemented into the NBA for the right reasons. Now, he's known in the NBA as a playoff choker. And his numbers in the playoffs, they might be better than Allen Iverson, but he is one of those players that you just know is going to mess up in the brightest moments. He's blown several 2-0 series leads. He's blown 3-1 leads. He's blown every kind of lead that you can imagine, and he always has a bad game in the postseason when you don't need it. It is a bugaboo that has happened with Chris Paul throughout his entire career, and nobody really remembers. No one is going to remember Chris Paul's amazing Game 6 on the Suns to push them to go into the finals, because they're only going to remember the fact that he lost in the finals after having a 2-0 series lead. Again, cemented for all the wrong reasons. And on top of that, if we're going to look at, I brought up, how the internet likes to make the meme about, Iverson and practice, and how that's, an iconic thing. But one of Chris Paul's most iconic things is Chris Paul with a huge three-pointer to cut the lead to 42. That is, again, cemented in basketball for the wrong reasons. And that is why a lot of people are going to, and in hindsight, think Iverson had a better career than Chris Paul, when in reality, Chris Paul has had a very solid career. It's just the playoff bugaboos that haunt him, and everything else that comes along with it. But when you look at the stats, like I just talked about before, Chris Paul clearly has the better career, clearly has the much better advantage, and he also has the longevity that Allen Iverson didn't have. Despite not having the MVP, or not having a single MVP to his resume, Chris Paul has had a much better career. But let me know what you guys think in the comments on this. Do you think Chris Paul has had a better career? Do you think Iverson has had a better career? But that will be the end of this show, and that is the end of the 5th segment. So thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, please remember to use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. That is GSMCPodcast.net. It really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. That is all I have for this segment again. Thank you once again. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't